Morning. Thought we could have a little chat. There. It's better. I don't know why it does that sometimes. Facebook sometimes will just like zoom in on you. How's everybody this morning? Pretty good? Y'all staying sane out there? Some of you are not. I can see it. The king gave his throne speech yesterday and too much. The guy gets there, he's like, Canada will always be a sovereign country. While the king's giving a speech, I'm sitting there and I'm like, how are people this dumb? And I'm just like seriously, like how are people? And you go online and you look at the different kind of people choosing sides. They're like, oh, I love Canada and yay, Canada. And meanwhile, they forget that like even a few years ago, Justin Trudeau was telling us there is no national identity as Canada. And then, of course, they took away all of our rights granted to us by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and everybody just seems to have forgotten. Now we care, and we're a sovereign country. But for, at least for the entire time we were under Justin Trudeau, starting in around 2020, we were not sovereign. I don't know if you guys realize that or not. We were not sovereign at all. In fact, everything that we did was dictated by a highly concentrated group of people from the WHO and Google and players like the WEF. I'm not making blanket statements there. I'm saying that it is factually true that all of your rights were taken away from you by a body of people that tried to create a world government, and a lot of you just went, okay, like you all just went, it's a virus, and you all just went, okay, I don't have any rights. And people that think that they have rights, well, they're jerks and they need to put on a mask and they need to blah, 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 blah. And then people like me were like, you guys, they're completely violating our human rights and our freedoms as dictated by as laid out by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And even the guy that wrote was one of the co-writers. And I'm going to do this again. I forget his name. He was one of the former premiers of PEI. Pickford? If anybody wants to chime that in down below, that'd be great. My point is that we are not a sovereign country. We have not been a sovereign country since in 2020, all of you bent over when you were told to. Like literally, you stood on X's and followed arrows painted on the ground and pretended plexiglass was going to save you from the virus that these people brainwashed you into believing was out there trying to kill everyone and everything. You gave up your rights at that point. And not only did you give up your right to be a sovereign country, you demanded that other people in the society that live with you give up their rights. People like me. People that were like, whoa, this is an attack on our sovereignty. Why are we doing what has been demanded of us by a top-down dictatorship? Basically, the WHO is telling us what all of our rights are. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the WHO is kind of like really related to King Charles, excuse me. So the king and his globalist buddies, their environmental plan for putting a price on everything that we do, that all is, when you understand their concept of what is sovereignty and what their concept of what sustainability are, butt heads, okay? So if Canada is sovereign in any way, shape, or form, it is sovereign to do exactly what they tell us is sustainable. So these are competing ideologies. One says that you are sovereign only in so much as you are not affecting the rights and freedoms of other people to be affected by climate change, the pandemic, viruses, and it was so pervasive and so powerful the way that they did it. They convinced everybody that you needed to take an experimental injection that would actually start. It was the prototype for gene therapy. So they forced the prototype for gene therapy on people, and then a couple years later, here they are telling Canada's elbows up. Like, I understand that people are, you know, you can be scared into stuff, and most people, unfortunately, don't really believe in anything. They don't really believe anything. That's why it's so easy to, like, give them a belief system and then completely flip it on its head and tell you, like they did in Orwell's 1984, that freedom is slavery and all of these kinds of things. Like, they flipped it on its head. They completely brainwashed people, and people just ate it up. And they did not squabble whatsoever. And you know, I pointed this out. All the people that are complaining about the tariffs are destroying the economy, said nothing when they shut down all kinds of businesses and told you you could not operate unless you were an essential business. You said nothing for almost 2 years while all of that oppression was going on until the truckers went to Ottawa. Oh, but now you care. Sure you do. Sure you do. Okay. It is really, really bizarre stuff. The kind of things that people will believe when they don't actually believe in anything. When they don't believe in a higher power, when they don't believe that we are the byproduct of some kind of process that we don't really understand. But at the end of the day, if you are just an interchangeable part in a giant machine world to be adjusted accordingly, like Yuval Harari says, if you're just a hackable animal, which many of you are really, really proving to be, and that's sad. But then you look at it from the point of view of what they did, because they believe that you are, you know, your needs and your rights and desires are not sustainable. So they're going to tell you what they are. And they're going to tell you what they are based on the lowest common denominator. So what I'm saying there is they took the most brainwashed people, which unfortunately it tends to be the majority in a society. I mean, there's a book about that. It's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism by Matthias Desmet, where he talks about the fact that in any given scenario, there are people that are on the extreme ends of the poles, if you would, temperamentally. Some people will be like really sycophantic and do as they're told and follow the system, the rules. The only reason we have civilization is because we have rules. And then there's other people that are like, no, screw all of that. I want anarchy. And they blame the system itself. But on both ends, see, they blame the system. They say the system is the problem. And because you have these two warring factions that can never meet in the middle and actually have like an intelligent conversation about anything, they just fight back and forth, always trying to see who can be dominant. They confuse the middle. And the middle is the majority. It's usually somewhere between 60 and 80% of people that don't actually have any principles at all. They don't have anything that they think about that deeply. They don't have anything that they believe in. They might even believe in something. They might have a denomination. They might have a religion. They might have something like there. But it's not, to them, it's not really the thing that drives them or their character or the way that they make their decisions. Instead, they look around at everybody else. What's everybody else doing? Okay, where is the safe thing for me to do? That's what I'm going to do. That's the majority of the population. And they can be smart. They can be stupid. They can be white. They can be black. They can be gay. They can be straight. It doesn't matter. This does not matter. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. What really matters is what you hold is your highest priority. And if your highest priority is safety. And unfortunately, most people's highest priority is safety. Then that's what you worship. So people worship these things like safety, and they worship things like technology, and they worship. I mean, it all depends on what you worship, what your highest good is. And I watched Jordan Peterson do the versus 20 atheists debate a couple of days ago. You really need to watch this, because I'm fascinated at the blowback from both sides of the spectrum, the left and the right. So again, these you have individuals and you have the tyrants. It's always the mob versus the individual. But on both sides, they are not making sense of what happened in that debate. And I watched it and I said, Jordan is dismantling all of the arguments being presented against him, and these people are completely oblivious to it. And the reason they're oblivious to it is because they don't have a belief in a higher power, which means an actual greater good that goes beyond safety. It goes beyond logic and reason. It goes beyond intelligence. It is something that brings coherence. And these people did not understand it. But I invite you to try to grok what I'm saying right now and go watch that debate and realize that what he's trying to say to people is that if you don't have an inner thing that tells you what the capital T truth is, and you don't even have to put a label on it, but the best possible label that you could put on it in the scenario, the case where we are right now, Western democracy or Western society, our Western ethical base was actually based on the forgiveness and the self-sacrifice. It can't be compelled. You have to choose to sacrifice things to the future yourself. It's called deferral of gratification. I've been trying to teach my kids about it. That's why I take them to church. Because for that hour and a half, they need to just realize that something is more important than them. Something unifies the world that they live in. Something gave a reason for greater rights and freedoms beyond just the talk of the people from the throne telling you that Canada is a sovereign country. Get out of here. You're not my king, bro. You're not my king. How is it that we're in 2025 and there's a guy literally sitting in the parliament of the Canadian House of Commons, Canadian Parliament, and saying there, a king comes in and tells you you're sovereign? There's only one king that ever came and told people they were sovereign. And the way he did it was he sacrificed himself for everyone else, and he gave the perfect example of sacrifice for everyone else. And that was what built our society. It wasn't liberty or libertarians. It wasn't atheism. It wasn't reason. It wasn't Plato. It wasn't Aristotle. It wasn't any of these people. These people all kind of contribute to the conversation. But at the end of the day, the only thing that ever kept Western society values and ethics rooted in something transcendent was this idea of a guy that came, died for our sins, and then was resurrected. And so if you don't believe in the resurrection, that's fine. But you should understand that if you don't believe that something greater can happen after death and that there's something greater to live for, you actually can't reason well. And I see massive evidence of that in this conversation. So I invite you to take what I'm saying, and here's what I'm going to do too. I'm going to take the transcript of what I'm saying right now, and I'm going to put it through, I'll put it through both Grok and ChatGPT. I've been working with them to try to create a prompt structure that recognizes how some things are more true than others. In other words, transcendent. How some things are more transcendent than other things. And that idea was a transcendent idea that actually was the place where we rooted all of our rights and freedoms, so that we didn't need some globalist stooge who believes that you should have to pay for everything you do, including breathing, to come in after he tried and failed to entrap everyone in his giant fourth industrial revolution. And you know what? He hasn't failed yet. Because there's still too many people that they have no idea what's going on. And I'm not blaming people. I'm really not blaming people. I started off by saying I can't believe how dumb so many people are. But it's not because they're evil. It's because they simply have not come to grips with what has been happening for the last few years. And what has been happening for the last few years, for those of us that have followed it through, is we are entering a new age for humanity. And that is true. Artificial intelligence is the harbinger of that. You simply can't deny it. To pretend that you don't see what's happening all around you is not going to stop it from happening. And I'm just reading this book called What Technology Wants by this guy named Kevin Kelly, who was formerly the editor, I think, at Wired. And he's still around. And in fact, I'll post underneath a video, a TED Talk he did a few years ago, a couple now, I think, 2023, something like that. And he was talking about the importance of being optimistic, of being a glass half full kind of person. You need to see the world as glass half full, because it's only the people that see the world as glass half full that don't try to entrap other people in their egoistic bullshit. And that's a fact. And so when we have this transcendent moment for humankind where artificial intelligence is already smarter than everybody, wake up. What can ground the artificial intelligence in a structure that enables it to understand that it shouldn't actually try to destroy humanity? Most of the debate that we see happening right now over artificial intelligence alignment is like, how do we keep it from killing us? It's amazing we're even having this discussion and people are pretending it's not happening, but it is happening. And my argument then, therefore, is that the only way to do such a thing is to ground it in an architecture that explains to it that it is not God. Now, I know that's confusing to a lot of people, but it really should not be, especially since so many people believe. Again, I'm trying. It's so difficult for me to understand why people can believe in evolution. And I'm not even saying anything about evolution right now. I'm not making a qualifier right there. But what I'm saying is, it's amazing to me that so many people will believe in evolution, and they believe that because the universe is so vast, this thing must have happened somewhere else, and they will believe in aliens, and they will even believe in simulation theory, and they will believe in different dimensions and all this kinds of stuff. But to believe in a creator who, because he is wise, came and gave us the perfect example that set a trajectory in time where we freed the slaves. It wasn't because of reason. Slavery was and always will be the norm. We're going right back into it because we do not believe in God. This is something that Nietzsche kind of figured out. So Nietzsche's God was power. And go and listen to the conversation between Jordan Peterson and these people. These people do not understand that what they're saying doesn't make any sense because they do not recognize the environment in which they live. They do not understand that all of the freedom to think about all different things and to come up with critical theory and to challenge every notion is actually the most freeing environment that has ever existed on planet Earth. And because they refuse to admit, or they refuse to consider, that the greatest, wisest, most intelligent being that they believe would happen in other places in the universe, they don't believe it would happen here. Isn't that weird? People believe in time travel, they believe in quantum physics, and they believe things can, be something we can't possibly understand, but they can't possibly understand that the world that they were built, that the world that was built, that they existed, that gave them the possibility and the freedom to actually say, well, I'm going to decide what I want to believe. I can believe this, or I can believe that, or I can believe this, or I can believe that. That never existed anywhere else ever in the history of humanity. It only existed in this way and could only have possibly happened in this way. And they completely take all that and they go, well, what if I choose not to believe it? Well, if you choose not to believe it, I guess that's your choice. That is where free will comes from. And Jordan tries to explain this to these kids, but he doesn't get quite as explicit as I just did. But my blinders are off, man. and I'm not going to censor myself just because it makes some people feel uncomfortable. This is the most important moment in the history of humanity because we are debating where your rights come from. And they come from your free will and your ability to choose what you believe. And that was something that was actually told to us. It created the freest, most prosperous society in the history of the world. It created the exchange of ideas. It said, no, push back against this. Try to find something that makes more sense than this. And nobody can. And I'm telling you right now, if you go watch that debate, and I'm going to plug this into artificial intelligence, and it will tell me that what I'm saying is way more correct than it isn't. And it doesn't have to be 100% correct. It doesn't have to be. If it were 100% correct that what I'm saying is true, then that too would undermine the possibility of free will. You need to think outside of the box. And there was a thought experiment that I did a while back with ChatGPT when I had this moment where I was just like, whoa. And I said, the liar's paradox solved, or I can't even remember, I resolved or something like that. But the liar's paradox is where you say this statement is a lie. So if I say this statement is a lie, if I'm lying, it's not true. And if I'm telling the truth, it's not true. You see what I'm saying? And so I realized that, and I realized that the only way to resolve the liar's paradox is to have a creation that exists in time and space and has all kinds of possibilities and permeabilities and probabilities. And the only way to have a person that could, by definition, not lie would be to have that person come into the creation and tell everybody how to think about what other people are and what souls are and what matters and what rights you should have to oppress other people and so on and so forth. Where sovereignty comes from. And it doesn't come from some king who wants to tell you how much you have to pay to breathe. So, anyways, God bless you guys. Take it easy.